Over time, we have found a collection of misconceptions and myths and some straight up lies about Islam. First lie is Muslims worship a moon god. So some non-Muslims mistakenly believe that Allah is an Arab god or a moon god or some type of idol. However, Allah is in the Arabic language a proper name for God, and Arabic speaking Christians also use the name Allah for God. Now, one of the main factors of this belief is because one of the first uses of the crescent moon came from the 2nd century BC, where it represented the ancient Mesopotamian moon god Nana. And now today the crescent moon is associated with Islam. So many non-Muslims say, well, look, you worship the moon god. There's even a moon in the symbol of your religion. Next up at number 9, most Muslims are Arabs. Okay, so Islam is often associated with Arab people. But did you know that Arabs make up only 15% of all Muslims? The country with the largest Muslim population is actually Indonesia, and large numbers of Muslims are also found in Asia, Africa, Europe, as well as other parts of the world. Muslims are encouraged to learn Arabic because they believe that the only language that you can really get the full extent of the Quran is in Arabic. Islam oppresses women. Practices like forced marriage, spousal abuse are actually things that contradict Islamic law, and most of the bad treatment towards women actually come from people's own evil natures and their own cultures and their beliefs, and it's completely separate from the faith of Islam itself. Muslims are extremists. Now, this is a big one. Many Muslim leaders and scholars frequently speak out against all forms of extremism, and they offer different explanations and interpretations of Muslim teachings that have been twisted by others to promote extremism. Muslims believe the entire Quran, taken as a complete text, gives a message of hope as well as peace and faith and good virtues, and any form of extremism cannot be justified under proper interpretation of the Islamic faith. Oh boy! Islam is intolerant of other faiths. Muslims are constantly reminded that they are not the only ones who worship God. Specifically, Jews and Christians are called the people of the book in the Quran, meaning that those are people who also received previous revelations from God and are also can be seen as true worshippers of God. Also in Surah 2 verses 256 in the Quran, it says, "There is no compulsion in religion." And this is interpreted to mean that you cannot force anyone to become a Muslim. You still gotta respect other people's beliefs. Halfway in at number 5, jihad means holy war. So jihad in Arabic does not mean holy war. It actually means to strive or to struggle or to persevere. And jihad can be something that's done personally, or it can also involve a community. So in effect, jihad really means to become closer to God. And this type of struggle, jihad, is to ensure that a peaceful and equitable community still continues to exist. Of course, self-defense is acceptable to protect yourself and your community from any sort of dangers. However, any form of offensive aggression is prohibited in Islam. Alright, number 4, Islamic prayer doesn't really have any meaning. Most people now know that Muslims are to pray 5 times a day. And now in Islam, there are several benefits to prayer. The daily prayers help keep Muslims' minds on God, and it helps Muslims to remember the Quran because they recite passages of the Quran, as well as it's a time to go before God to express thanks, to ask for forgiveness, to look for guidance in your life. So there's a whole lot of meaning for Muslims when it comes to prayer. Alright, number 3, Jesus is completely irrelevant in Islam. That's actually not true. Jesus, however, is revered as a prophet and the Messiah in Islam. The Islamic faith believes that Jesus will return as a Messiah and defeat the Antichrist. This view is also very similar to the Christian view. The only difference is that Muslims don't view Jesus as the Son of God. He's just seen as a prophet when you compare it to the Christian faith. Alright guys, we got 2 more left. So the crescent moon is a universal symbol of Islam. It's actually, yeah, it's not. Okay, so the early Muslim community did not really have any sort of symbols or anything. Now the crescent moon, as well as the star symbol, they actually predate Islam by several thousands of years. And as a matter of fact, they weren't affiliated with Islam at all until the Ottoman Empire placed it on their flag. And over time, the symbol became more associated with Islam, but it's not actually their official symbol. That just doesn't exist. And the number 1 biggest lie, myth, misconception misconception about Islam is that Muhammad is the founder of Islam and Muslims worship him. Muslims believe that Muhammad was God's final prophet and communicated God's final revelation to humanity. Muslims consider Adam, the first man created, to actually be the first Muslim because he was, of course, surrendered to the will of God, and that's what the term Muslim means, one who surrenders to the will of God. Muhammad is held in great esteem, but he's not to be worshipped because worship is only meant to be directed towards God, and it's completely forbidden to worship anyone or anything else. Muslims may, however, celebrate Muhammad's birthday similar to the way that Americans celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Let's start off with the lie at number 10. We have Muslim women are forced to wear the hijab. There is this big stereotype out there that Muslim women are all forced to wear a head covering, and this is a very popular misconception. Probably, yeah, like the most popular one. But Islam actually does not accept forcing someone into doing anything against their will. In the religion of Islam, women have the choice to wear the hijab, and it is no one's decision other than her own. Muslims revert to the verses of the Quran as well as the Hadith, and nowhere does it say in either of those sources that a man must make the decision for the woman to wear a hijab. The lie number 9 is hijab is only a head covering. There's a large number of Muslim women in certain countries who wear only a headscarf, but this actually doesn't fulfill the meaning of hijab. Hijab is an Arabic word meaning barrier or partition. It can also be translated into the word veil. And also in Arabic, the headscarf is called khimar, and the plural for it is kumur, and it has been used in the Quran specifically itself, and it states, "And do not display their beauty except what is apparent, and they should place their kumur over their bosoms." And that's taken from the Quran, Surah 24, verses 31. So the hijab is to cover the private parts of the body. Therefore, some scholars view that all parts of a person's body must be covered with a veil. And this is to be done so that people cannot recognize any private part on his or her body. So this type of covering is the hijab and not just the headscarf. Moving on to number 8, hijab is only for women. This is another big one, guys. The Quran says, and I quote, "Say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty." And that's found in Surah 24, verses 30 to 31 of the Quran. So you see, these verses show that guarding modesty is not only for women, but it's also for men. So men and women have the same role towards promoting modesty. However, the appearance and the methods can be different in terms of the nature and the situation of covering up. Number 7 brings us the lie that all hijab wearing women are more religious. All right, guys, so just to clear this one up, just because somebody wears a hijab does not mean that they're more religious. This is the same as saying that Christians who go to church every single weekend are more religious than those who go occasionally. Well, Muslim women who wear the hijab do so because they want to be modest and want to follow God's directions to a purer life, among other reasons. But Muslim women who wear the hijab, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more religious than Muslim women who don't. It just means that that's where they are on their journey in Islam. The next lie to look at is women who wear the hijab are uneducated. This is a very unfortunate misconception and lie that exists. On many occasions, people assume that women in a hijab are less intelligent than others who don't wear one. But hijab has nothing to do with education or intelligence. Let's take a look at the Arab world, for example. Women oftentimes surpass men in their education as well as in STEM skills. And by the way, STEM stands for science, tech, engineering, and math. As well as they often surpass men in participating in social causes. So it's actually common for hijabi wearing women in the Arab world to excel in education over men. Halfway to number 5, hijabis can't be successful. Now, a woman wearing a hijab can do her job and succeed in her career just fine. There are many Muslim women who contribute to society and are very successful in their life while still wearing the hijab. One of the earliest examples is Aisha, the last wife of the Prophet Muhammad, and she's one example of women excelling. She didn't need to uncover herself to live a great life, and she actually contributed a lot to the writings of the Hadith and became a well-known scholar. So Muslims teach that the hijab is to really protect a woman, not to hinder them in any progress and development of their life. The lie number 4 is the hijab is never taken off. This is a common one in high schools and universities and colleges, but Muslim women are to wear the hijab when they go outside, they pray, as well as when they're with somebody of the opposite gender. But the men that she can uncover herself before are men that she can't marry, like her father, grandfather, nephew, brother, or uncle. But they should cover in front of men that they could potentially marry. So a Muslim woman does not always have to have their hijab on. They don't sleep with it, nor do they shower with it. Yeah, some people ask that, if a Muslim woman showers with it on. No. Next up, let's look at number 3. Women who wear hijab can't be feminists. Well, feminism is not defined by bikinis or body coverings. It's about female empowerment. In fact, women who cover their hair are promoting feminism even if they don't explicitly say that that's what they're doing. When a woman stands up for themselves, as well as they stand up for other women and wear the hijab and promote that as their choice, that is feminism. Lie number 2, practicing women wear hijab. According to research conducted by Sarin Karasu, religiosity is linked to commonly Islamic associated practices such as wearing the hijab. But whether a woman's hair is covered is a bad rule of judgment for how religious she is. Some women wear the hijab but don't pray regularly or fast during the month of Ramadan, which are, as a matter of fact, obligatory in the religion of Islam. On the other hand, there are many Muslim women who don't cover their hair but pray regularly and fast during the month of Ramadan. According to the blog muslimgirl.com, Shireen Izoli outlined her view that while the hijab is indeed a woman's obligation in Islam, it is not a pillar of Islam. And finally, let's end off with number 1. The hijab oppresses women. The idea that wearing a headscarf is oppressive in and of itself ignores the reasoning of the person who wears it. Third wave feminism holds that women should get to choose what practices are best for them. And it does not say that uncovered heads, it's more of a sign of liberation of women, and that's what it should look like. That's not what feminism says. And around the world, we see secular governments, and this also includes Muslim majority countries, they've tried to force women in certain ways to uncover their heads, to attend school or to hold public office, or even to just walk down the streets. There's many examples of this. As a matter of fact, even today, France infamously imposes legal restrictions on wearing the hijab. But with that said, voluntarily covering oneself can be an act of empowerment, not subjugation and oppression, and trying to force women to uncover, well, that would be oppression. Number 10, Shias don't pray to God. Yeah, there's a lot of other Muslims who believe that Shia Muslims do not pray to God at all. And instead, they pray to Imam Ali or Imam Hussein, or not pray to any deity at all. Now, this is a false belief, and the main belief of all Muslims is the belief in one God, or Allah in Arabic, and God alone. Shia Muslims also believe in one God, and they love God just as much as any other Muslim. Shias have a different Quran. Now, this is a very popular lie, and it's often cleared up pretty easily, but nevertheless, the misconception does still exist. Shias believe that there is only one Quran, and one of the miracles of the religion of Islam is that the Quran was preserved in the original form. It's believed that the Quran now is the original Quran recited by the Prophet Muhammad, and all Shias read the same exact Quran. Next up at number 8, Shias don't pray 5 times a day. Now, this is one of the most common misconceptions and lies. The 5 daily prayers that all Muslims perform are required to be done. And Shia Muslims, they pray 5 times a day. The only difference is the timings of the prayer. Shias pray the 5 prayers, but they split them up into 3 times a day. And now the reason for this is because the Quran only mentions 3 times of prayer during the day. Also, Sunni Muslim scholars agree that the Quran mentions only 3 times for prayer. However, they keep to praying 5 times a day based on hadith. But there are many Shia Muslims who actually pray 5 times a day like Sunni Muslims. Alright, next lie to clear up is that Shias pray to a rock. This lie comes from Shia Muslims praying on a torba, which is a round piece of hard clay that your forehead touches during prostration while you're praying. But Shia Muslims, they do not pray to the rock. The Shia belief is that while prostrating in prayer, their foreheads must touch natural earth and not something artificial. This is done to follow what the Prophet Muhammad did during his prayer. There are several hadiths that state that the Prophet Muhammad lifted his head from prayer and the mark on the earth could still be seen where his forehead was, like the hadith found in Bukhari. And it says, and I quote, "The Messenger of Allah said, 'The earth has been made for me a place of prostration and a means of purification. So wherever a man of my ummah is, when the time of prayer comes, let him pray.'" Moving on to number 6, Shias don't love Prophet Muhammad. Ooh, okay. So Shias are often believed to only love Imam Ali and Imam Hussein. It is true that Shias love Imam Ali because of his role in preserving Islam, as well as other qualities that he had. And they also love Imam Hussein and many other devout companions and family members of the Prophet Muhammad because of their devotion to their religion. Now there's a passage in the Quran, specifically in Surah 42 verses 23, that Shias base their belief on, and it goes as follows: "That is of which Allah gives the good news to his servants, to those who believe and do good deeds. Say, O Muhammad, I do not ask of you any reward for it, but love for my near relatives. And whoever earns good, we give him more of good therein. Surely Allah is forgiving, grateful." Now, halfway into number 5, Shias focus too much on Imam Hussein. This is another big lie. Imam Hussein was the Prophet Muhammad's grandson, and Shia Muslims remember his martyrdom. Imam Hussein's family, as well as other members of Prophet Muhammad's family, were chained and dragged and held as prisoners, and both Shia and Sunni Muslims remember his death during the month of Muharram, and the pilgrimage to his shrine in Karbala attracts many people each year. So it's not only Shia Muslims who make this pilgrimage for what is known as Ashura, but Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Hindus, as well as other Sunni Muslims, they commemorate his life and his stand against injustice by paying homage to his grave in Karbala. Alright, the lie number 4 is Shias don't use the hadith. But the thing is, how to pray in and of itself is completely based on hadith for both Sunni and Shia. So the misconception that all Shias don't use a hadith or use hadith that are unreliable is just straight up not true. Many hadiths are taken from Ahlul al-Bayt, with many famous Sunni scholars agreeing on the importance of the Quran and Ahlul al-Bayt. Now, next up at number 3, Shia Muslims hate Sunni Muslims. No, not true. Shia Muslims do not hate Sunni Muslims or any other non-Shia Muslim. Regardless, Shias and Sunnis, they are all Muslims who believe in Allah and love the Prophet Muhammad and all other prophets. Although there are differences, they all pray in the same direction, they pray the same amount of times, and they pray to the same God with the same amount of love for their religion. But unfortunately, extremists on both sides, they fuel this division and hatred towards each other. But there are actually many countries where Shia and Sunni Muslims live together in peace, such as countries like Iraq, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, as well as others. You'll also even find Sunni and Shia marriages. Number 2 brings us this lie: all Shias are from Iran or support Iran. Now, we gotta clear up for sure that not all Shia Muslims are Iranian or support the Iranian government. But yes, the majority of Iranians are Shia Muslims. However, the majority of Shia are not Iranian. There are Shia that live in countries like Saudi Arabia and Lebanon, Iraq, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Pakistan and India, Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia. The list goes on. So definitely you'll find Shia Muslims on every continent. And the final lie we got to clear up in this episode is the belief that imams are infallible. Well, this is actually not true. All prophets are born prophets, but as mentioned in the Quran about Abraham, that after passing the test, a prophet becomes a leader or imam. And imams are carriers of the message of Islam. Shias consider Ali only as an imam, but they consider Muhammad as the prophet or Nabi, as well as a messenger or Rasul, and a leader or imam. So yes, imam is just one title, but no, they love and respect Prophet Muhammad and an imam doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is a prophet and completely infallible. Now, starting at number 10, Muhammad created the religion of Islam. Also, there's another belief that Muhammad is worshipped by Muslims, but generally speaking, Muslims believe that Muhammad was God's last prophet and communicated God's final revelation to all of humanity. Muslims consider Adam, the first human, to be the first Muslim though, and Muhammad is seen as an example of how to be a good Muslim, but he is not to be worshipped. Worship is only for God, and it is forbidden to worship anyone or anything else other than God. One of the biggest misconceptions about Muslims is that they do not believe in Jesus at all. Jesus, also referred to as Isa in Islam, is a highly respected prophet and Messiah in Islam. The Islamic tradition believes that Jesus is going to return as the Messiah and defeat the Dajjal, which is known as the false Messiah. Muslims also believe that Jesus was born of a virgin birth and he doesn't have any earthly father, and that he did great miracles. There's even an entire surah in the Quran titled the name Maryam, which is Mary in Arabic, that details some of the info relating to Jesus in Islam. Another misconception about Islam is that Sharia law is evil and it's old, it's archaic, it should not be in the world at all. But Muslims believe that Sharia law or Islamic law is about protecting the innocent people and upholding Islamic values. So this includes things like praying and fasting during the month of Ramadan, things like that. Also, Sharia law is not about extreme punishments for little simple offenses. Where the confusion is that the punishments for offenses during the early Islamic period, they seemed very, very cruel. However, the Islamic laws of that period were believed by Muslims to be well above the pre-Islamic Arabia. Also, according to the religious scholar Paul McNamara, he says this: "There's no need for such harsh punishments to rehabilitate a person. This understanding did not exist in the early Islamic society, and for that matter did not exist in any society during the antiquity period." So Muslims again believe that Sharia law is simply a law that helps govern society, although yes, there have been some harsh punishments associated with Sharia law. This is often compared to any other country that has severe and harsh punishments for certain crimes. The next misconception we're going to look at is that the moon and the star is a symbol of Islam. Although the symbol is used and it's viewed like it is, the early Muslim community, however, did not really have any symbol to represent them. Now, one thing to note is that the crescent moon and the star symbols, it's believed that they actually predate Islam by several thousand years, and it wasn't really affiliated with Islam at all until the Ottoman Empire placed it on their flag. And over time, the symbol started to become more associated with Islam. And the next big misconception to highlight is Muslims live in the Middle East. Now, this is a huge misconception because most Muslims, over 1 billion of them, live in Asia. Also, more than 300 million Muslims live in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the 4 largest Muslim populations in the entire world go to the countries of Indonesia, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Each of them are home to more than 100 million Muslims. Now, the majority of the people who live in North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, as well as Southwest Asia, are also Muslims, but they only make up about 20% of the global Muslim population. For number 5, another misconception that's similar to number 6, all Muslims are Arabs. Well, Islam is often associated with Arab people, but the fact of the matter is that Arabs make up around 15% of all Muslims. So like I mentioned, most Muslims are in Asia, and the actual country with the largest population of Muslims is Indonesia, which stands at approximately 225 million people. Also, the population of Iran totals about 82 million people, and Iranians are Persians, not Arabs, and most of the Iranian population are Muslims. So yeah, Arabs don't even make up anywhere near the majority of Muslims in the world. The next misconception to look at is Muslims are either Sunni or Shia. Like Christians and other religions, there are different sects and branches of Islam. The 2 major and most well-known branches are Sunni and Shia, but there are many other subgroups with different teachings and different practices. Also, there are different Islamic schools of thought and law. There are Muslims though that hold the view that other groups who call themselves Muslims aren't actually Muslims, but that in itself is just one belief. Some other notable Muslim branches are Sufis and the Nation of Islam. Number 3, I had to put this one in this episode, jihad. The meaning of the Arabic word jihad is struggle. It usually means a struggle of one's own soul against sinful desires. So it doesn't mean holy war in the sense that Muslims are warring against humanity. This type of struggle or jihad is to ensure that peaceful communities continue to exist on the planet. Of course, self-defense, if someone is attacking your home, your community, or your nation, is acceptable to protect yourself. However, offensive aggression is prohibited completely in Islam. The misconception at number 2 is Muslims don't tolerate other religions. Some who claim to be Muslims can at times be very forceful in their beliefs and how they talk about other religions. Muslims actually hold the view that they are not the only ones who worship God. Jews and Christians, for example, are called people of the book in Islam, meaning that they are people who previously had received revelations from God. Also, when we look at the Quran in Surah 2 verses 256, it says, "There is no compulsion in religion," meaning do not force anyone to become Muslim, for Islam is plain and clear. And the final misconception we're going to look at in this episode is Islam oppresses women. Sadly, most of the oppression of women by Muslims that is publicized in the news is due to local customs and traditions. Muslim women have been presidents though, as well as prime ministers of nations, and violence and aggression towards them and forcing them against their will is not prohibited in Islam. Muslims are to care for widows and orphans and the poor, as well as treat their women with great respect. The Prophet Muhammad also taught people to be very friendly with their wives, and even stated that wives should actually be their husband's best friends. In one hadith, it says the following words. The Prophet said, "The best of you are those who are the best to their wives, and I am the best of you to my wives." Unfortunately though, many Muslim women have been oppressed. However, this is a major issue that goes beyond just being oppressed by other Muslims. Abuse towards women is not any higher among Muslims than among other people of different religions or no religions at all. At the end of the day, we should strive to continue to show respect to anyone regardless of their beliefs and their genders. The Quran contains the religious bases that Muslims live by. And just like any other religious text, certain understanding and misunderstandings abound. At number 10, we have Surah 2 verses 191. Now this has a false interpretation, and that is, slay the unbeliever wherever you find them. Now you see, reading the verses before and after actually gives some context, and that's not necessarily what the verse actually says. Either way, when we look at Surah 2 verses 190, it says, "Fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress. Indeed, Allah does not like transgressors." And then moving on to Surah 2 verses 191, it actually says, "And kill them wherever you overtake them, and expel them from wherever they have expelled you. And fitna is worse than killing. And do not fight them at al-Masjid al-Haram until they fight you there. But if they fight you, then kill them. Such is the recompense of the disbelievers." And then moving on to Surah 2 verses 192, the next verse, it says, "And if they cease, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful." So those scriptures there just really give some context of the actual text. Now moving on to number 9, Surah 3 verses 28. Here's the false interpretation of this one. Muslims must not take infidels as friends. And by the way, infidels are unbelievers. Now, the Quran doesn't forbid Muslims from becoming friends with non-Muslims, but during wartime, it says that they should not join with the enemy. When we look in the Quran, we find this: "Let not believers take disbelievers as allies rather than believers. And whoever of you does that has nothing with Allah except when taking precaution against them in prudence. And Allah warns you of himself, and to Allah is the final destination." And that's the full verse of Surah 3 verses 28. Next up, let's look at Surah 3 verses 85. Here is the false interpretation for this one. "Any religion other than Islam is not acceptable. Therefore, Islam is not tolerant of any other religious group. Here's the thing, all religions usually say that their religion is the most correct or the most beneficial, so there's not necessarily anything wrong in and of itself with Islam making that same claim. However, in the Quran, you will find certain verses that actually esteem prophets in Judaism and in Christianity. So this does point to one aspect that Islam is tolerant in. Now, the Quran says this: "Say, we have believed in Allah and in what was revealed to us and what was revealed to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the descendants, and in what was given to Moses and Jesus and to the prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between any of them, and we are Muslims submitting to him." That is Surah 3 verses 84. The Quran also says this in Surah 2 verses 256, "There shall be no compulsion in acceptance of the religion." The next misunderstood verse is Surah 8 verse 12. It goes as follows: "Remember thy Lord inspired the angels with the message. I am with you, give firmness to the believers. I will instill terror into the hearts of the unbelievers. Smite ye above their necks and smite all their fingertips off." And now for context, this was a verse that was revealed around the time of the Battle of Badr. The pagans of Mecca, they traveled more than 200 miles to Medina with an army of over 1,000 men to kill Muslims who numbered around 300. By this verse, though, Muslims are ordered to fight to defend themselves. Another verse in the same chapter, Surah 86 verses 61, says this: "But if the enemy incline towards peace, you also incline towards peace, and trust in God, for he is one that hears and knows all things." And that is a proper context of that verse. The next misunderstood verse we're going to look at is Surah 9 verses 123, and this is how it goes: "O you who believe, fight those of the unbelievers who are near, and let them find in you hardness, and know that Allah is with those who guard against evil." Now, this verse, according to Muslim sources, is speaking about the hypocrites who were among the Muslims in the time of the Prophet. The unbelievers who are near you were in actuality non-Muslims posing as Muslims who sought to corrupt the believing Muslims from within, destroying them from the inside out. Now, this instruction was to fight them, and fight in this context is to resist the skepticism of these hypocrites. The next two verses actually point out that this is actually about hypocrites. And whenever a new chapter is revealed, some of the hypocrites ask the believers in jest whose faith has increased because of this. As for those who believe, it will certainly increase their faith, and they are joyful over that. And that was taken from Surah 9 verses 124. Now, halfway in at number 5, we have Surah 48 verses 29. And it goes as follows: "Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against disbelievers and merciful among themselves." Now, the disbelievers in this verse refers to those who persecuted and attacked the Muslims. This is not a verse directing Muslims to just go out and mistreat other non-Muslims. Moving on to number 4, here we look at Surah 98 verses 6. Now, this is the false interpretation. Anyone who doesn't call themselves Muslim is going to hell. But you see, the actual verse goes like this: "Verily, those who disbelieve from among the people of the scripture and al-mushrikun will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures." Now, according to Islam, Muslims, they're not allowed to say that any one person is going to go to hell just because they call themselves a Christian, a Jew, or they have a different religious label or no religious label. Each person's destination when it comes to the hereafter is only known by God. Now, moving on to number 3, here we have Surah 5 verses 101 to 102. Now, here is the false interpretation of this one: "Do not question Islam." Well, the full verse reads like this: "O ye who believed, ask not questions about things which, if made plain to you, may cause you trouble. But if you ask about things when the Quran is being revealed, they will be made plain to you. Allah will forgive those, for Allah is oft forgiving, most forbearing. Some people before you did ask such questions, and on that account lost their faith." Now, this is in reference to those people who ask useless questions about when a revelation is revealed from the Quran. And here's the thing, if all their questions were answered, well, it would have made the duties of their faith and practicing their religion a lot more specific, and therefore making it a lot more difficult to perform. Moving on to number 2, here we have Surah 8 verses 65, and this is a false interpretation. The unbelievers are stupid. Urge the Muslims to fight them. Now the correct reading of that verse is this: O Prophet, urge the believers to battle. If there are among you 20 who are steadfast, they will overcome 200. And if there are among you 100 who are steadfast, they will overcome 1,000 of those who have disbelieved, because they are people who do not understand. Now, Islam teaches that this verse was revealed to motivate the Muslim army, which was less in number than the opposition in the Battle of Badr. Now, we end this episode off with the most misunderstood verse of the Quran in this episode, and that is Surah 22 verses 19. Here is the false interpretation first. Punish the unbelievers with garments of fire, boiling water, melt their skin. But this is not describing an Islamic punishment to be administered, but rather it's a punishment that happens in hell. Here is the more correct translation of the verse, along with verses that say that this is the punishment in hell. When we look at Surah 22 verses 19, it says, these are two adversaries who have disputed over their Lord. But those who disbelieve will have cut out for them garments of fire. Poured upon their heads will be scalding water. Now, Surah 22 verses 22, it says, every time they want to get out of hellfire from anguish, they will be returned to it, and it will be said, taste the punishment of the burning fire. And then we have the following verse that contrasts what those who are granted paradise will experience. And just notice the similarity when it comes to the symbolism of being clothed with garments. And this verse that I'm referring to in Surah 22 verses 23 says, indeed, Allah will admit those who believe and do righteous deeds to gardens beneath which rivers flow. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearl, and their garments therein will be silk.